It has been a while since I have discussed Arcane, and I'm sorry about that. I have been busy with League of Legends reactions and I'm getting into the lore, which I have found actually fascinating. But I did want to record some more of these essays. For that very purpose, I actually decided to rewatch Act 1 because I figured I didn't really give enough attention to Act 1. Obviously, I have been paying attention a lot to characters in Acts 2 and 3. Most of all Caitlyn and Vi, because there's just so much to dive into when it comes to these acts, and in Act 1 they haven't even met. However, I found some very cool details and something that's definitely worth sharing. Might be a shorter video. I definitely missed this one, and I think maybe you missed that too because it's not really as obvious. I've been focusing on that and that's how I found it. I don't know if they did that on purpose, but knowing Arcane, how meticulous it is, how many details they have hidden here and there, how many hints and references, I'm thinking it could actually be on purpose. So I realized that first lines of the most important champions do define them, and with some they even correlate. Let's get into this and I'll show you that introducing most important characters was definitely something that they focused on a lot, and they did leave certain hints. The very first time we see Ekko, he says,
"What's going on with that thing?
Give me a few seconds. The cannon pinion's still busted.
Finish it later."
Now, first of all, this is obviously a reference to Ekko's cinematic trailer called Seconds, when they present that he is able to actually go back in time using that very device that he will construct possibly in Arcane Season 2. The second thing that tells us is that he's obviously an inventive mind. It's one of his most prominent characteristics. He likes to invent, he likes to reuse stuff that he finds in the streets of Zone. He doesn't really like getting new stuff. In a way, he's very eco. Oh, Ekko, wow. I didn't even realize that's definitely an accident. So it's both a little references, a nice one, and also his main personality trait is hidden within this very sentence. Now, if we check Heimerdinger, the first time we see him, he enters Jayce's cell. So one would think as a head of the council, he would most of all focus on what Jayce did. But no, this is the first words that Heimerdinger says in the show.
Imprisonment. What a curious principle. We confine the physical body, yet the mind is still free. I do love a good conundrum.
So he's there, right in front of a prisoner who blew up the Kizzamity building, one of the wealthiest clans building. Possibly people died, got hurt for sure, as we know, thanks to what Grayson said. However, what he focuses on is the philosophical side of prison. Now that defines him a lot as well, because Heimerdinger, as head of the council, has been neglecting his duties. He's been focusing a lot on his inventive skills, on science, and not as much on the actual problems that Piltover and Zone face, most of all inequalities. Apart from the one that I want to focus on the most, Jayce is an exquisite example. First thing that Jayce says is,
"A little danger is worth the risk, don't you think?"
But is it worth the risk, Jayce? The event that he mentioned triggered everything that has happened in Arcane. The fact that he went to Zone, the fact that he got the equipment, led directly to Ekko finding out that he has a lab with very expensive stuff. That led to Ekko telling Vi that there's a lab out there, that led to Vi deciding to go on a heist and taking Powder with her. That led to the explosion that Powder caused. That led to the investigation, major investigation unmatched for, and that led to Vander giving himself up and all the other events. But I'm actually working on a separate video when it comes to chain of events, so do stick around. This one will be a longer one. So going back to that, what Jayce said also defined his inventive passion and his light approach that basically caused everything that happened in season 1. One of the first things that Powder says is,
One day, I'm gonna ride in one of those things.
now that I cannot actually explain, but that has to be a foreshadow. I think in season 2 she will write one of these things, or otherwise this wouldn't be mentioned at all. Now the one that I have discovered, and I find this to be an amazing little detail, my favorite one. It obviously all comes back to Caitlyn and Vi. Caitlyn and Vi were actually so close to each other in Act 1. Caitlyn was following Jayce with equipment to his lab, while Vi was on the other side of the wall, stealing stuff from Jayce's lab. This is actually such an amazing detail as well, because there's a wall between them, not only the physical one, but when it comes to their behavior, how they act, where they live, all of that. All the differences that are not unlikely to exist when it comes to two people living in such different places. So Zon and Piltover also coming from very different backgrounds. Vi not really being wealthy, and Caitlyn coming from one of the wealthiest clans in Piltover, daughter of a council. So there's the difference between them right there. But they're so close to each other at the very moment. And they were also both part of the explosion that led to everything that happened afterwards. Now, the first thing that Vi says in the show is,
"It's nice getting above it all, huh?"
Now, Vi was obviously shown in the very first scene of Arcane, but she hasn't said anything in there. The scene was very important, but she hasn't said a word. Her very first words were directly focused on getting above the dark streets of Zon. That correlates to the very first thing that Caitlyn says in Act 1.
You really went to the Undercity to get these? Weren't you afraid?
Both of them mentioned going to the other side. As we know, Caitlyn and Vi's fates are tied together. Events of season 1 were focused on both of them getting to know each other and getting to know where they are from, trying to understand the other point of view. Caitlyn went down with Vi. She got to know Zon. She understood what it's like there. She saw the inequalities and whatnot. Now Vi, she had a strong prejudice going on. She hated the enforcers that killed her parents. She hated the fact that people in Piltover are wealthy, have access to resources unavailable to people in Zon. Both did not know the other side. And interestingly so, the first thing that both of them say are focused on going to the other side. Caitlyn shows her interest in visiting the Undercity.
I'm a misfit too, I suppose.
Even as a small kid, she was curious, and if you have a look at her expression, she's actually so impressed that Jayce that went to the Undercity. Of course, it could be part of the overall excitement when it comes to assisting Jayce, who's older and an inventor, so that probably impressed her. But most of all, it just seems like she's very excited that he went to the Undercity. And the whole point of Arcane Season 1 was her journey to the Undercity. Now, in the contrast, you have Vi. The first thing she says is that it's nice getting above it all. So she shares her excitement and her fascination when it comes to getting to Piltover. And in Acts 2 and 3, her entire story is focused on leaving the Undercity behind and assuming the role that League of Legends set for her, which is an enforcer. Eventually, she's gonna become an enforcer with Caitlyn. It's safe to assume that they won't change that part of the story because they are bound to be partners, both in job and possibly in real life. So that's what I'm hoping to see in season 2, and I think I will see that. We will see that, made videos about that already. So yeah, it might be a small thing, but it's a detail that I find incredibly exciting, that Kate and Vi are not only like yin and yang, they not only have their fates tied together, their stories combined, they're always together. I even discovered that each time they get separated, one of them gets hurt. So that's also a detail that maybe I would discuss in another video. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say today. That's something that I find incredibly cool. Not only these first lines define them, but when it comes to Caitlyn and Vi, they also correlate and they show us the path that both of them will take in Acts 2 and 3. So there's 2 more Arcane videos that I am working on. Just stick around, and major shout out to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Much love. Bye.